documenting the front lines of the AI revolution, the AI Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. Today, we have some guests back from our first season, Terry and Salma from RemyxAI. They are here to talk about what they've been up to. Terry and Salma, first, thank you guys so much for coming back on, and thank you for taking time out of your day.
Hey, thank you. Likewise. Thank you, both you and Jacob and Spencer, for hosting us. I think last time we had an awesome conversation, and it's a pleasure to be able to hop back on and continue the conversation.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Yeah, we are very excited. I think this is really what Spencer and I kind of envisioned when we talked about this podcast initially, is like, let's build this network, we call it a family, this AI Rebels family, and then just like see where it goes. Because like people like you guys, you're the people that are going to be building the cutting edge AI tools and getting integrated more and more into the AI space. So we're really excited to see just what's happened in like 8 or 9 months since we last talked to you guys.
Yeah, it's been a minute, and it's been a ton of new things I think popping up. The space over time is maturing. I think there's a lot of common problems that people are starting to converge on, or patterns about what kinds of applications work or are really interesting. And we've been learning alongside everyone else too, just figuring out what is working in application.
Mm-hmm.
What are the new challenges that are emerging because of the changes and all the new releases? And we've been basically using it to also guide ourselves in terms of where do we take Remix? What are the best kinds of problems that we could help developers overcome, and then create new things through easier to use tools, and also tools that will help solve the problems generally that whatever they're building applications for. How are they helping the business? How are they helping either lower their costs or be able to serve more customers, or even just reach new heights, basically, because we have this huge unlock, right? So it's been super exciting just to learn alongside everyone and see where this is going.
That's awesome. So I'd be interested in hearing, why don't we just jump right in? I'd be really interested in hearing what you guys have been up to since we last talked, any changes, any pivots. Really interested.
Well, one thing I think, as we were chatting last time, we were starting to think more about like working with the problems people were facing in LLMs, and the cost of training the models has gone down. Like more people are finding smaller models are better out of the box, but there's still like things that they want to do to try to get the best performance for their application. So like since we were chatting last, we've like been doing more with synthetic data and more with LLM fine tuning. Multimodal models have been like pretty big this year, so we've been doing more with experimenting with use cases for specializing those models. So there's like open source projects we've done around that, and I would say like this year we've really taken the studio, like that application that we were showing before, as like a test ground for what things were interesting and useful for developers who came to the site, and trying to like now double down on the most useful workflows and like building up the CLI, the APIs for doing that. So taking what people were sort of experimenting with through our app and like trying to build out the code for like infrastructure as code for people to like build this more into like production workflows too.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Since the last time we chatted, we basically, stuck through and true to the kind of a platform or workbench or studio, as Terry described, a place where you have a collection of tools to help you in different parts of that ML development process. And we've been leaning more and more into kind of foundation models. So this kind of new variant of models, right, that may be a little different than classical deep learning model architectures, or how models work, or even classical machine learning, where we have this new paradigm, these models that have distilled essentially the internet down into their weights. They are out of the box, can do a ton of things really well and very impressive on their own. But we've been finding, even in application, is that folks are able to take these models and create a quick POC and validate, that a particular application structure is possible, or that It has a potential in terms of building a quick MVP. But where people are now struggling is to get to that last 10% improvement performance to actually get that MVP down to something that can be put into production, put in front of customers, and then improved upon over time. And, we've been kind of exploring deeper into that space, into that gap. How do we help folks figure out what tools, what mechanisms, techniques, methods they could use alongside everything that's been deployed and all the stuff that's been released in open source to inch away over time, improve upon their initial MVP to a point where they have now many possible paths to explore on improving that application or even making new applications with those ideas.
I guess
Awesome.
one thing that we've noticed, especially I think that's kind of resonated with people, was the burden of choosing a model. So every week, right, there's like new models that are coming out, and some of them have issues, and some of them have challenges that will make it harder to work with. So people are kind of constantly facing the "is this model worth it?" Kind of dilemma, and in the volume of models, right? Like hundreds of thousands of them now in open source, basically to choose from. But there's still like challenges even discovering those models. Like, are they well documented? As I said, like maybe some models have problems overfitting benchmarks or different things like that. What tools or what I guess utilities are there out there to help recommend the best model? And like, shouldn't that be based on the context of your application, right? We think there's like practical constraints that everybody's facing. Like, is this model small enough to be fast? Is it big enough to be good? Has it been trained on data that's relevant for my use case? Like, is it better at code? Is it better at math? And so trying to help people match models to their use case has been like one of the stickier things that's kind of brought people into trying it out. It's like,
how do you with that right now I'm envisioning like a dating app. How do you match people? But like what do you do to help them figure that out? Do you have a questionnaire, or like what does that look like?
It definitely involves us swiping.
Yeah, love it.
More like a simple prompt example. So the idea is that we want to find a best match given the context of your application, right? And one of the simplest, easiest pieces of context you can give is maybe a data sample of what your data set is going to look like for the model you're going to be training, or if you're going to be fine-tuning or something like that, or even just like an example of what kind of question or what kind of prompt is someone going to feed into your application. And we basically use different probing strategies to understand from the models that you want to compare, like as a group comparison, right? How do those models respond to that initial sample? And then we essentially use LLM as judge to rank, essentially from like a 1 through 5 or some kind of like ranking mechanism to be able to tell or just enlist those models in the one that has the best kind of fitting response, meaning you probably have the closest data distribution to what you'll probably find in application is going to be a model that will probably be the best one to help continue moving forward. You'll be spending less time, energy, being able to reduce the gap between what was previously trained on that model versus what you're going to need that model to do next. So the idea is, from that little piece of context, can we tell which model has the best data priors, meaning probably it's going to be the easiest one to fit into whatever application you're trying to develop.
Interesting. So with that process, in the end, is it like a user driven choice of you feed it the information, the data, and then the user essentially chooses like, hey, I like this prompt better, or excuse me, I like this answer better than this answer?
It's being judged by an LLM, so it's more automated, but we're not fixed to like one specific way of evaluating the models either. So we've tried different things, and I think a lot of people have tried working with benchmarks and different benchmarks, maybe more like fine-grained skills assessments, and people are using synthetic data and judges, like what we're describing with this matching feature. But also there's probably room for more like custom judges, ones where like the user can drive more of the evaluation criteria and things like that.
So you could design a rubric essentially that you would feed into the LLM's judge, and it would then use your rubric to judge. I like responses based off of this quality, so let's rank all of the models based off of that automatically and return the ones that are best fit for that context, right? So
we're kind of thinking like through a variety of methods to evaluate. Like some are better suited for different phases of development too.
Yeah.
So this matching feature we're describing is probably a good way to quickly like narrow down your search from like dozens of models maybe to a half a dozen models, and then as you're kind of comparing or optimizing different models, maybe it's through fine tuning or maybe it's through like some other application specific process, you'll be able to use other evaluation methods there too. So with the matching, it's like more emphasis on automation and like quick kind of narrowing down the scope of candidate models. And then like we want to have like a really broad suite of benchmark evaluations too, because they have a strength in other parts of the workflow, like making sure that you didn't lose something after training a model, right?
Yeah. So, there's different, where we're also just kind of concluding over time is that evaluation is something that probably needs to occur at many steps or probably throughout the entire process of developing an application. So Terry, with the matching, describing like the model selection, that might be at the very first step that you will do in terms of starting a new project or even visiting how to update an existing project, right? But as you move through the process, you might use benchmarks to then post training understand if the quality of the certain skills that were out of the box in the base model are still present, or if they've been altered in any way due to the fine tuning, and then be able to tell that later on when you have that model deployed and it's being used in your application. You probably want to understand how users are responding to the output of that model, right? So it'll be a different kind of evaluation that will be also in context with all the other kind of measurements that you took along the way, to then at the end of all of that entire process, you have a better idea on these are the directions that I need to go and explore to help improve upon the model X, Y, or Z way.
That's awesome. Question on that. So with the initial evaluation and choice, is it so does the user kind of choose like, hey, like I want to look at language models, here's my task. So let's say like
share one right now, actually, if you'd like to.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be sweet.
Because I'm curious like what happens, like say like a customer comes in and they're like, I think I need a language model, and then from their input it's like, nah, you just need a really simple classifier. Is there a way for bumping them towards the smaller options?
Right now, the evaluation framework is kind of like starting with LLM. So assuming that you've already decided or determined that you need an LLM.
Got it.
But through the agent, which is what we actually chatted about last time, right? We're still developing that. And that's the layer that we want to add on top of that studio that will help make recommendations out of all of those little data points. So all of the measurements that you took, the context that you gave us about what you're building, the agent over time will learn alongside with you on, okay, maybe we actually want to approach the problem this way. We could design the application this way, or with the current design of the model, we might want to explore like adding this data because users responded with these prompts that we don't actually have in the data distribution. Let's go ahead and like kick off data synthesis or data curation jobs. That will be kind of the abstraction that we're working towards, that will sit on top of all the individual tools. So right now we've been trying to
build up tools
to unblock developers immediately, and then we'll use that agent to kind of learn on top and then also learn alongside the developers to help them.
That kind of opinionated automation that you described, it's like they're in some limited way right now when you interact with the agent. like if we were looking at the different tools, as Salma said, like more of the tools that we've made recently are like focused around LLMs, VLMs, like these are larger foundation models. But what you're describing about like recommending somebody try BERT for a problem instead of Llama, that's like just a tool away from creating that, and then basically instantiating the agent with those opinionated kind of instructions to do that. We think that LLMs with tools is a good way to balance the flexibility that experts might want to really
Hmm.
customize things, and at the same time like kind of keep things easier than working with like a giant config or something like that, having more
Yeah.
opinionated priors that are making it easier for people to just quickly get something done.
And then
That
digging
makes
a
sense.
little deeper into the meta of that, I think also um, we think that the agent could be something that could help organizations at large and individual developers kind of work with an AI strategy that grows with them over time. So if we kind of look at the last 10 years, the most successful companies that have put out machine learning into production, you think of like some of the like a Netflix that's recommending movies and it's got you hooked on the next series.
Right.
They have over the years they've been able to build out like all these workbenches that they've specialized. They've been able to design the metrics that help them understand how to better recommend new series and movies for you to keep watching. And that's something that takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of
Yeah.
expertise. And we're hoping that through something like an agent, that like LLMs with tools idea, that we could help people build up that intelligence so that you can more quickly get to the point of you're finding which metrics actually matter for improving your application. Like if you're building a chatbot, it's actually responding in the way that users are using it in a positive way, or it's helping improve some KPI that you've designed, right? Without having to have gone through the 10 years of building that from scratch and maintaining them from that point onward. It's just kind of more focusing on, can we help people have that intelligence humming in the background so that they're
Hmm.
focused more on being the architects of their applications rather than all the grunt work of the data wrangling that you might spend
Right.
days or
Right.
weeks on individually before you even get to like the meta problem. And that's another point too. Actually, I was just thinking about how code generation is becoming a lot more interesting of a space and becoming a
Yeah.
lot more robust. And so with that being commoditized, we're thinking that, it won't be the primary function of an ML engineer, or an AI engineer, or a data scientist, whoever is building AI applications won't necessarily be primarily, the code generation itself. We think that there's going to be tools to help, handle integrations or be able to create you like a quick template on how do you train this thing, or how do we
Hmm.
deploy with a scalable server. And the idea is that we're going to rely more and more on the engineer's expertise, experience, context, creativity on how is it that they want to solve problems, and then basically learn alongside the system to help improve upon that over time.
I guess like
That's awesome.
what we've been thinking more about is like the experimentation workflow that goes from the baseline kind of V0 MVP of a project that you have, and getting those improvements, consistently making improvements with the changes that you're experimenting with, and like what are the dimensions, I guess, that people really like to experiment with. And for
Hmm.
a lot of people, like the easiest experiment to carry out is like switching the weights.
Yeah,
It's like
Mhm.
trying a different
super easy.
model, because making models is expensive. But how can you help people through that problem that they're facing like every week, and evaluating,
I
is
see.
this
Yeah.
one worth it? Is this like worth investing in a V2, V3, and so forth?
Hmm.
It's awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess
See the
what I pulled up real quick is just like our docs generally for showing
yeah.
the bigger ideas, like a
Yeah.
collection of tools, and then eventually, a studio or a workbench that has that intelligence baked in to help folks design and then improve upon their applications. And so right now we've been super focused on How do we make all of the easy to access front end version to get you a quick test? How do we make that easier to work with with all the other tools that you might regularly use? So if you're frequently turning into Hugging Face APIs to do some like data wrangling or model training, we want to have tools that work alongside all the other tools in the ecosystem in the terminal or with infrastructure as code to help you basically move that process along a little further. So basically, if all of y'all out there want to check this out and try some of these out, we have some new docs and also some tutorials on how to use some of the evaluation frameworks too, specifically that we've done. And this is basically the idea of what we're building towards is abstractions like what we call a mixed board. So the idea of you have many models that you want to look at from different facets, right? With different kinds of evaluations, like the model recommendation based off of like a prompt, or the evaluation on the benchmarks on how are these different models performing on common benchmarks that you see out in the leaderboards, or even eventually like your custom rubric, and you want to evaluate how models respond on specific prompts or questions, and then evaluate models in that way. So we've been building abstractions to help people basically compare a bunch of candidates. So for example, you might be looking at different variants of families or specific model sizes, or context on how you want to compare and contrast all of these models. And through either the APIs or the front end, you can go ahead and try to understand like how are these models ranking. So for example, with the mixed match, we return a rank list for the specific kind of utterance or context. And in this case, it was a customer success type of example. We found that even some of the smaller models were actually doing really well. The instruct variants seemed to be performing relatively well. So if you wanted to explore some models, you might like look at the ones in the top. And over time, we're exposing more ideas in terms of how you might look at models in the different lights, right?
That's super cool.
Wow.
Go ahead, Jake.
Oh, I was just going to say, so if I understand it right, now there's the model selection where someone's able to come, they're able to use the agent to create an app, an AI app, and they're able to use the model selection to determine the best LLM for their app and make that selection.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right. And so, when we have somebody taking that list of maybe a dozen or more down to like the list of two or three, it's like probably easier for them to keep the cost and the time to experimenting down, and make it more like iterative, using more of the information, that context. Like start with the best weights that you can, then maybe think about things like fine tuning or ways you can optimize the model further.
Yeah. So a visual representation is like, in this view, you'd be able to, with the utterance or even with the other ways that we want to evaluate, presenting the rank or the score of how these different models that you wanted to compare. In this case, we only wanted to compare two. And the idea is that, all right, we found you a signal. Here's a recommendation. Why don't we go ahead and trade this model? We'd help you piece together all the other things, like maybe help you evaluate how you might need to design your data set for this particular prompt utterance. Maybe you might find that you have a small data set that you need to explode out. Maybe you need to find other samples, real samples in open source, or explode it out synthetically. We could help with that. And then also recommend ways to train and then eventually support that model so you can test in front of a human. If someone were to ask something like this, does this model perform the way that you expect it to? And be able to capture that information and feed it back into the system over time.
So I'd be curious to hear, how do you guys evaluate the rankings themselves? Do you have an eval framework of your own for making sure that the rankings are legitimate?
Yeah, we've experimented with some of the techniques for doing this, and it's like part of the problem that we want to own and like close the gaps on. Like, we're sort of making a prediction about what you might do empirically, but it might cost a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, like this application that we're building would give us visibility to try to like own that service and close any gaps there. Like
Yeah.
what I would say is like it's it's an early service, so it's not something that I could say like, hey, this is just as good as empirically training all those models on
Yeah.
like the actual data. And it's a evaluation problem is still a very difficult problem in
Yeah.
general. So that's why we are advocating that people use a variety of unrelated techniques. And it's like I've seen a bunch of different advice on evaluation, but generally speaking, if you're using a variety of unrelated techniques to assess something and you're seeing like a general trend, right? Like that in general, one model is like dominating on a few different evaluation methods, then that's something you can be a bit more confident about. And so we're trying to build like the framework that will allow us to track that information and really like close in on that prediction problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It's
And
definitely
you,
a rich area.
yeah. And I feel like everyone is trying to figure out how to deal with this problem, and everyone has their own approach.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah. So you identified this through just observance of the industry, or is this from like actual users of the agent that you noticed this problem?
Well, so I would say like whenever we read a paper, for example, like they always scope down the world of candidate models down to like something much smaller. It's like
Yeah.
the 5 models that are kind of dominating the benchmarks, or maybe it's like the 8 models that have been trained on like domain specific data. So a researcher is always kind of scoping that leaderboard down to something that looks more like a slice of the leaderboard. Like there's certain models they care about, and there's certain evaluation metrics that they care about. Most models aren't trying to be good at the most general kind of like AGI benchmarks.
Yeah. And once you get into application, that scope will definitely narrow down to the specific things that you actually care that model to do, right? And even something, it might even entail having to do a custom evaluation. So maybe a benchmark itself won't be enough.
That's where we started to think more about how the leaderboard could use like some kind of experimental analog. Like today or this week, I have an experiment on my queue, and it's to compare the existing model with the next version or some fine tune and make sure.
New family that came out that could be better, or has like a new skill that baked in that we should explore, right?
And you know, opinionated priors or what have you, you're going to say I don't care about models in this size and that, or these models are too small for my use case, something like that. So bringing all of that in and like scoping that down, that's where the analog to the leaderboard, what we're calling the mix board, is like for your experiment, for your comparison. And so we can focus that comparison and try to help you find the ways that list of candidates are ranking or differentiated, and doing that through a number of different lenses so that you can be confident, because probably there's not just one evaluation method that we've come to rely on just yet for like all kinds of different use cases.
And even then, that that over time that might change. So you might find that in production, when users are using your application, you thought something was important, and then it was totally something different. So how do you
no one cared about
all the calculus, right? And like feed that back into, okay, well, we need to adjust our priors, and we need to prioritize all these other things we didn't even have on our radar.
It's like not something you're going to find in a benchmark data set that researchers are using. It'd be hard to make that even as a custom evaluation. Like it's hard to anticipate all the ways someone might want to use it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the language model equivalent of the famous story about Apple Computer, where they went and designed the GUI, and then the first thing a user did was drag my computer to the trash and destroy the whole thing.
Exactly. You might want to account for that in the data.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So can you maybe just to summarize, not summarize, but to help maybe some of our less technical listeners, could you, in just like a couple sentences, describe the consequences of choosing the wrong LLM? What happens
Sure.
Oh,
if that
that's
occurs?
a good question.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's say you've picked the wrong LLM. Maybe you've spent early on a few weeks, let's say a month, and you provisioned many GPUs, which, maybe your employer right now is really hurting after you've provisioned a ton of compute to go ahead and train a bunch of models.
Yeah.
And maybe you found, some area, some pocket of models that seem okay. And you go through the entire process from that point onward, continuing to add more data, train your model, deploy that model, sustain its life cycle, and then have it up and out. And basically, maybe you might have spent months just ideating, and then pouring a bunch of resources into making this one model that maybe is suboptimal kind of work, where if you maybe had a better sense of the needs of the application, you might have picked a model that was a little closer to what you were trying to do, or generally more better responding at the kind of task that you needed to. You may maybe have spent a month instead of many months trying to get this thing to work.
That's a lot of sentences, but maybe like
Yeah,
maybe
he's
just
better at
to,
summarizing
No, that's
that.
good.
well, I would just say like practically speaking, like the switching costs are high for people. Like they figure out a way to do it, they're not going to change. And so if you've picked something that's not that great early on, it's probably not going to be the first thing that you try to revise when you're getting improvements later. You're going to
Hmm.
turn to like the other techniques. But
Mhm.
if you started with a better base to begin with, maybe you aren't going down those rabbit holes. Maybe it's just kind of better from the beginning.
Yeah, it could be, maybe to summarize a little bit closer, you might have started with a design, and then after all of that work and investment, you might have found that actually this completely different design and model architecture would work a lot better with less inputs. And so you might save yourself a lot of time and resources overall, both on
Yeah.
what you're thinking about and what you're provisioning.
That makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
So is there ever any plan to kind of target non-developers with this, or is the plan always developers?
When we first began, it was like it seemed like the direction to go was towards less developers, maybe project managers. Maybe you
Mhm.
could bring people in really early to kind of ideate or prototype the app, and then there could be a way to hand off to like those other teams. But as we've been working through it more, it does seem like the people who want to own these workflows are going to be more developers, more interested in AI, like a little more expert. Like
Yeah.
hard to say that this belongs in like a novice's workflow for like I made my first AI app.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's kind of like, to put a point on that, it's about who's most interested and invested, right? It could
Yeah.
totally get to a point where a total novice, someone who has no context on it, could build an AI application. But in terms of getting started and then digging deeper, who's most invested, it might be a developer. We're thinking that
Hmm.
maybe a general software engineer or developer who has general context on nothing data related in particular could totally do something like this. Maybe
Yeah.
you might even get to a point where like a project manager, so someone who's motivated about what application and design and its interface, could also have a hand in building application. um, but it might be in the world of people who are generally building or thinking about product where it makes the most sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Got it. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because if you think about just like the general, end user, the customers, the people, non-technical users, I don't know if a lot of them would even have a desire to build an AI app. There
Right.
would be some,
They want to
I'm
use
sure.
one,
They were like, oh, that'd be
maybe
cool.
not
But
know.
yeah, right. So and especially right
And
now in the adoption bell curve, I feel like we're still in the
Mhm.
early adoption here, and all the early adopters are probably a little more technical developers for the most part.
Yeah.
We see that we see this tool as being most helpful for kind of small teams that uh, don't want all of the overhead of building like evaluation frameworks, and like maybe
Mhm.
want a fast, easy experience with some of these workflows being kind of managed services.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea, if you're a crazy chemist and you're
Mm.
trying to run an experiment, instead of spending all your time, blowing hand blown glass flasks or something like that, you're
Yeah.
actually spending your time doing the chemistry rather than all the other stuff that it entails to run your experiment and then learn from it.
I see. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. It kind of makes me feel like it sort of reminds me of like Heroku, but for AI.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the vibes I'm getting. Jake, and for our non-technical listeners, Heroku was a web hosting platform that had like really extensive capabilities, a lot of hosted databases for developers and things like that just took
Nice.
a lot of the overhead of managing the infrastructure of an app off of your plate.
Yeah, totally. And so for us, like, as we're finding that it's still very experimental, it still requires a lot of trial and error. How can we make that process way easier, way cheaper for more folks,
Yeah.
so that you spend more time exploring rather than spending too much time on all the other adjacent things?
So the Heroku, equivalent of today with AI would probably have like an agent helping you stand up some of that stuff and make some of those
Yeah.
recommendations, agents with tools.
That
So
makes
that's
sense.
kind of where we're
Generate
taking
the
this.
integrations, like, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely don't want to waste a ton of time on things like that, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
more of that helper to help you
Yeah.
get through the process.
We imagine that like when you're working with this helper and you're getting context about like an application and deployment and like the experimentation history, what's worked, what hasn't, you kind of have an assistant in running the next experiment and helping you figure out where like future improvements might be. So like something to help with your ideation, experimentation, um, to improve the app. Mm-hmm.
Are there
Wow.
ever any plans to bring like some agent creation abilities to Remix itself?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
definitely. So kind of like long term, after we help
Yeah.
people with the individual experiments and we learn from that ourselves, we totally can see a future where we have like prepackaged applications that where you kind of feed in the context and we can help you build
Yeah.
your own agent with the agent or
Yeah,
your
yeah.
own RAG application or whatever else that might look like, right? It very much will get super much into eating our own dog food, but you could totally see a future where you could build systems on top of systems. The idea of like you could just like we're using it right now in the studio in the application using AI to help build AI, you could design even other AI systems.
Well, the point you made earlier, right? Like, um, when we kind of converge around like what is a good pattern for an agent, like that LLM shim layer that is kind of helping people work with the weights. Like maybe that doesn't change a lot. Like maybe there's open source frameworks, and the basic ideas are getting you a lot of what you can get out of an agent, and so it's like we're kind of uh, banking on the exciting part of the development still being a lot about like modifying the weights and things like that.
Yeah.
After seeing all the patterns, we're going to converge on patterns that work, like the agent frameworks,
The code generation will be kind
will
of
help
more
build the
automated.
apps.
Yeah.
And so the thing that's most fluid and will change over time are probably those weights, and that'll entail that experimentation process still.
Gotcha.
It's a
Huh.
it's a hard thing to measure. Do these weights improve things? And so having those tools, those workflows, we think will probably get a lot more people over the hurdle for making like good, consistent changes to their apps.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like things like this are what are really, we've talked a lot. I feel like the last several episodes, we've talked a lot about this, how AI is really enabling just an individual, like one person corporations, someone to come in and create a massive, something that can have a massive impact, just a single or a small team. And things like this are what's essential to be able to compete with these bigger companies. Like how can you compete with OpenAI if you don't have something like this where they're continually evaluating, they're continually adjusting weights, they're doing all these things
Yeah.
because they have the resources, but
Mhm.
this is that's exciting. I mean, this really is an empowering to the individual, the
That's
the
what we're
frontline
hoping.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're hoping like a data scientist will be unblocked with like building up so many things and just iterating, experimenting really fast. Not being, I guess, bogged down with um, all the different difficulties setting up these environments or learning about new methods. So we want to kind of really expedite people on the different techniques that are available and like support that so that it's easy
Yeah.
for them to compose.
Yeah, just as you said, like how does someone compete with OpenAI, right? And we get glimpses into what they're doing to help improve their models. Like, for example, when you get two generations of when you're chatting with ChatGPT, that's like they're running an A/B test, right? And that's
Mhm.
something that is a great way to get online metrics about how your application is performing and is very essential. A lot of the organizations in the last 10 years have been relying on that pretty heavily to improve things. But historically, everybody has been locked out because it's just so complicated,
Yeah.
expensive to find the right people to maintain those systems. It's like in
Right.
itself a whole kind of worms. So we're actually at a great, interesting inflection point with the AI tools themselves, where maybe we can bake those patterns in, that context in, that experience, to the point where that is more automatable, that is more within reach for more folks, so that
Yeah.
we can take advantage of those patterns and those ideas that were previously just out of reach.
Definitely. I love that. Has there been, this is a slight shift. I'm curious, has there been a release? There's so many new players releasing these LLMs. Has there been a specific model or, you know, NVIDIA, Amazon, whatever the player is, has there been a new release in the last several months that you've been really excited about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, probably the Quinn models for vision language models have been really good, and
Mm,
on that, like Allen Institute has released a fine tune they call Momo. So I've been really excited about that one. It can like point and it can understand like spatial relationships
it's
from
crazy.
objects in the scene much better than a lot of the other open source before now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's we've been exploring a lot recently with multimodal models because they have also been more variants that you can more easily accessible to fine tune or to train and do things. And so we've also been exploring with an open source, like putting together composing pipelines to help build multimodal training sets that you can introduce new tasks to some of these models. And so we've been experimenting with fine tuning Lava, and hopefully, when Momo comes out with some of their training code, that'd be something to explore. We've
Hmm.
done other variants
Done a
like
bunch.
Queen. So yeah, we've done a bunch. So, that's a super interesting area that we think will also be a place to grow into, because eventually, you won't just be dealing with text. Like, you might just want to inject also any image context or
Yeah.
audio context or chat logs or something else, right? To help better improve the task that you're trying to perform for your application. And so if we can get these models to perform, if we can get data sets generated and created or designed from the context you have in a way that isn't painful or
Right.
terribly complicated, I think that will be super interesting for a lot of other applications to come soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, the world of open source AI just keeps getting cooler and cooler, like every single day.
Yeah.
Some of the open source image models these days, like I've been doing a lot of image model work lately, and man, like it's
Crazy.
a little mind blowing how far they've come.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like a
Yeah.
little bit concerning. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Things moving too fast.
No
But
kidding.
The thing about those, I'm excited. Hopefully, we start finding ways to make them smaller and faster. Like, that's the only thing that I see that is kind of holding it back from doing some really insane stuff with like robotics, right? Is like
Yeah.
Yeah.
being able to use this in more of the like behavior and control
Yeah.
and robotics is super exciting. But probably you can get this to run pretty fast with like some of these NVIDIA embedded
Oh yeah, there's
GPUs.
even
But
like new pruning techniques for some of these
yeah,
multimodal models
that's
coming
true.
out too, which is going to help like reduce the size significantly.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of stuff
Hmm.
happening there to make even things like robotics move a little further ahead than what they've been kind of been stuck at the last few decades, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So what's this? What's the VQA synth
Oh
that you
yeah,
have pulled up?
this is actually in light of the multimodal models we've been excited by. This is an open source implementation of a paper that basically describes how to take a set of images and then be able to transform and extract additional signals from those images using a variety of models to then
Yeah.
get to a point where
Interesting.
you can design a multimodal data set in this example to be able to tell spatial relationships. So some of these visual models right out of the box may not be able to tell you very well, like the man in the red hat is 3 feet away from the group of other people on the right hand side, or the man is taller than the boxes. So from a variety of models, can we extract the information about the spatial relationships between different objects in the scene so that
Wow.
we could help create a lava model or one of these multimodal models be able to answer questions about
That's awesome.
so and so is 3 feet away or something like that. So we have some examples. Here's you can find this space. It's one of our favorite examples recently. This really cute doggy. And you'd be able to tell like different relationships. Like maybe it might say, hey, the costume from the tail or the different parts of the image is this distance, and it basically does that from piecing together like Sam and we're using Florence to create bounding boxes of objects and locations, and then we're creating using depth extraction. We're making point clouds and then comparing from the point clouds, like
Wow.
where are they in relation to space, and then making the prompts that then you would feed into your VLM. So you feed this basically this utterance, this
Yeah.
whole prompt question answer along with the image, and then you'd be able to train a model to kind of get the idea of estimating distances between different objects.
Interesting. So,
Wow.
as in, the goal is to train like excuse me, I can't think of the right word right now. A single model that does all of these together
Yes.
by synthesizing the data using this. That's awesome.
Yeah, we have this
That's
pipeline
fascinating.
that's doing all this 3D reconstruction, and we want to distill that into a model so that with one model you can do everything else you can normally do, and this to like better
Yeah.
distance estimates and
Yeah.
spatial understanding.
Yeah.
This is something that's so exciting about the current age of AI is like so many of these we have the methods to kind of combine so many of these
Mhm.
techniques. Like the transformer
Mhm.
architecture is insane.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's what we're thinking too. Even once you
The
get past
general
that
problem,
one,
like
yeah,
it's not just LLMs, it's not
it's not
just
just
Yeah.
that single model.
VLMs.
It could be like a whole host or ecosystem or architecture of models that each do
Right.
their different things, and they kind of work together as
Mhm.
agent or even something else.
They
to
might
do
differ
something, right?
mostly by data, right?
Right.
Like if you can
Yeah.
synthesize the data, if you can get the base model to have like strong priors in general capabilities that are related, then it's not out of the question that you can take that model and like really make it specialized or dialed in for your application too. So like we're thinking about foundation models in general. Well, where will they be in another year or two, a few years? Will they be doing more in robotics domains, or will they be used more with like structured tabular data? Like
Mm-hmm.
what are the different ways that we can try to organize this tool to support like how you might work with and iterate on apps based on transformers?
Yeah, like the next version of this open source project, what we're even thinking that we could do is that maybe all of the individual models we used, so in this example where you can see the different components we tried out to then get the final prompt response at the end, could we have an agent be able to say, from context of, hey, I'm trying to take, this collection of images and I want to extract these kinds of question answer pairs for me to be able to develop this model. Can we get an agent to understand that it needs to find models that can do object tags and captions, and being able to understand how to segment objects, how to get the depth estimation, and piece all that together so that at the end it produces the data set you need. So another meta way that we're thinking of using agents, right, to even help design some of the subcomponents or sub experiments you might even have. Like this is just the data wrangling part, besides even all the other things that you might do in fine tuning and deployment, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's sweet.
You guys have been busy.
Yeah. And a ton of stuff. It's been super fun. It's like a very much a time to keep your eyes peeled and ears wide open. There's a host of things popping up left and right, and folks running into new problems and uncovering new challenges that we're all going to have to think about and design our way to make better and more awesome applications over time.
Yeah, this is awesome. You guys have done a ton of work.
Yeah,
there's still plenty more. It's a good thing.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. Yeah, it's just there's so much left to do.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, it's wild when you think about what this is trying. Like, if we just think about AI in general, like what we're trying to accomplish with this is. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in the technology and like we were talking about LLMs and agents and all this stuff. It's like, if you take a step back, we're trying to create intelligence here. Like we're trying to create something that can think. We're trying to create basically a brain, like an artificial. It's crazy. And every single guest we have on, it just becomes more and more concrete to me that it's like the progress being made it's incredible. And I love that there's so much open source. I think I've heard that word so much in our conversation, just how important open source is. And I think that's so unique about this AI space right now is it feels like we're all on the same team, at least for the most part. But everyone's contributing and it's incredible.
Yeah. It's a great time to be a part of that community and learn alongside everyone. I think that, more and more the Pandora's box is opening and everybody's learning alongside. I think over time we'll all find a way to differentiate like our products and our projects by, how we design or how we approach a problem versus just like the fun or really exciting part of it is that the technology itself and all the learnings and the how the tech works and how it can be deployed is becoming much more and more common knowledge, more commodified, more accessible. And so it's going to be less about, do you have to have a PhD and all those kind of ideas or schools of thoughts to just be able to get to a point where you can get to that creative design application layer and get more people to that point so that we have even more variety of things that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I have an agent right now that's posting to Twitter for me and making websites for me. Yeah. It's great. I'm hoping he takes my job over in about a month.
Exactly. That'd be great. Well, Terry and Salma, I'm curious as we wrap this up. So this was, let's see, it was about 8 months. If you could say 6 to 9 months from now, where do you see Remyx? Like where are you hoping to be at that point?
I guess we'll probably be focusing more on these APIs and like customers, and it's possible we could be leaning into use cases that we don't have we haven't identified already, but probably learning more through like working with some customers on what's helping them the most.
Yeah, I think a primary focus is, can we flip all the learnings that we've had so far into here's a tool that your team can use and collaborate together and learn from each other on experiments. Can we also get that agent to help learn alongside with you to then start giving recommendations at that point?
We'll probably be doing more with data synthesis for that. Like it'll be more about integrating these tools that you've seen, in the app. It'll be more integrated through the CLI and trying to be like making this useful for infrastructure as code and more the experimentation kind of workflows.
So part of your existing toolkit, and then also being able to give the ability to create some of the more complex data synthesis or evaluation tasks. Like, can we take the VQA synth idea and make it more of that general idea on, can we help you piece together a custom data pipeline? And then from there, learn how those changes materialize into your application and then improve upon that, right? So idea is, can we flip a lot of the learnings into something that now you use it alongside Hugging Face or any other thing you might use at work already? And then have that agent start giving you really useful recommendations on what to try next.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It's exciting. We'll see if it happens or if everything changes between now and then.
It's totally possible. So yeah, I wouldn't put it besides us.
No, that's awesome.
All right, Jake, do you have any more questions?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Yeah, I've asked all of mine. Thank you again for coming on. I love hearing what you guys are up to, and I love following your Twitter accounts and seeing everything you post. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, likewise. Thank you for having us be part of your community. I think as well, like all the material y'all are putting out and the folks that you're talking to, it's super interesting. And hopefully we can find ourselves here again, having another chat, and then walking you
Looking
through
forward
the roller
to
coaster of the next thing we did.
We'd love to. Yeah.
Exactly. Love it. Well, thank you for coming on. We'll drop links to your X accounts and all the things for everybody who wants to follow along and try all this out.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.